So when I was about 15 years old, my dad worked in a frame shop, and the frame shop, he was a gilder. He gilded frames. He would put gold leaf on gessoed wood. Sometimes there was paint under the gold leaf, and once he gilded it, he would scrape it up a little bit, show the colors through it. And he had like maybe 4 or 5 different kinds of raw umber, kind of sienna colors, like really dark and earthy colors that he would use. And I would hang out at the shop. He'd have canvases laid around where he would set up these frames and he would spray them with gesso. And I had wood, canvas, gesso, and paint. So and I was surrounded by artwork because he was framing the artwork. So I taught myself how to stretch canvas and paint while I was there. And I did this a lot. I spent most of my childhood just drawing, just quietly drawing to myself. It was like my superpower. I was not very shy kid. I wasn't good at sports, but I was always the kid who could draw. It was my way of coping with things. And so he was very encouraging. In the shop, I would paint all the time, and I would stretch these canvases. And I made this one painting. It was based off of a Marlboro ad I saw in a magazine that was inside the office of a cowboy riding his horse, and he had the lasso over his hand, and he's riding as fast as he can through the desert. And I converted the painting, and instead of making it a cowboy, I made it an Indian with his fist in the air, and he's riding the horse. Anyway, so I made this large painting, and there was a few other paintings I made of odds and ends and things. Every year there was a fish fry in Orange County, Costa Mesa area. In a fish fry, you could buy a little, like 15 by 15 square foot space where you could hawk your wares, whatever they would be. I remember that I had my paintings up, and the guy next to me was selling all sorts of things that he made out of beer cans, hats and lamps, and all sorts of things that he would just creatively create out of beer cans, empty beer cans. And I spent the day sitting there on a stool around my paintings, talking to people about them. And at the end of the line of booths was a POW booth with some really kind of rugged-looking guys in there, older guys that were in there in the booth. And one of them came over, walked over to me, and stopped and looked at this painting I had of this Indian. It was pretty large painting. And he just stared at it for the longest time. He looked at me, this skinny little kid. I was skinny at the time. And stared at me and stared at the painting. And he said, "You painted this?" And I said, "Yeah." And then he started telling me a story. He started telling me about when he had gone to Vietnam. He was a young man. And he remembered landing in the jungle and being dropped off there with another company of some kind. And my recollection of the story was that he was terrified and that he met up with these men that had already been there for a while. And one of the men took him under his wing and started teaching him all about what he needed to know to survive in the jungle out there. And taught him all the things he needed to know and understand. He also confided in him with his culture. He was a Native American, and he started teaching him about the lessons he learned as a young man. And he kind of almost became a father figure to him. And as he's telling me this story, he's crying. His eyes are watering up because he's remembering this person so vividly as he's telling me. And I am so taken aback and not sure how to handle the situation. Again, I'm a 15-year-old kid who knows nothing about nothing. I'm talking to this grown man who looks like he'd been to hell and back, and he's crying in front of me, telling me the story of this long-lost memory he had of someone that was important to him in Vietnam. And he explained to me how this man meant everything to him, and he didn't have a father, and this person felt like a father to him. And then he died in a firefight in that jungle. And that after he died, he wiped the memory of him from his mind. And for whatever reason, seeing this painting brought it all back to him. So he thanked me, and he shook my hand. and then he left. He didn't buy the painting, but he left. Didn't mean much to me at the time. Well, it was, I was shocked at the whole scenario. But when I look back at that moment, it taught me something. It taught me that you never know what outcomes will come out of chasing something you love, chasing something you're curious about, chasing a thing that you're curious about, and running, not being afraid of expressing it and putting it out there will make things happen. Maybe not the first time, maybe not the second time, but eventually things will happen. Putting yourself out there is important. The theme today is living in the extreme. And I think that that's something that needs to be thought of. I generally do workshops and talk about creativity. But creativity is more than art. Art is the thing that is the result of a creative process. There is nothing more valuable than the creative process. The art that comes out of the other end is just the residue of it, is what happens because of it. But we need to value the process that created it. And the process that created it, we all have it. We all possess this thing. If we were to actually look at each other right now and be able to observe what is going on in everyone's mind, like a cartoon being drawn out above their heads, the cartoon would engulf the entire theater or room or anywhere that you are. It would fill the air with just one person's process. The voyage that we go through when we start considering and evaluating decisions of any kind, we are going through everything that we've lived through, every decision we've made, every mistake, every success, every opinion, every option, all instantaneously. It all happens instantaneously. And it's a burst of amazing energy that kind of goes through our minds on a constant basis. And we totally find it insignificant. And we're not impressed by it because we don't see it. You know, we see the end result. We see that painting or the idea that came out of the other end, and we place judgment on those things, right? We place judgment on the result of an amazing creative process and compare it to our own result that came from the same incredible creative process. If the focus was turned inwardly towards yourself, towards the idea that my creative process is unique to me, but also theirs is just as unique to them, and understand that how do we follow these paths and why do we follow them? Why do we make the choices that we make? This is a complex question. Not many people understand how the human mind works, but you don't need to know how to make a violin to play it, right? So if we understand certain things about the human mind, like how the subconscious and the conscious mind work together, where the conscious mind is the thing that makes the choices. The conscious mind is the one that decides where we're going to go, how we're going to go, and what we're going to do, and how we're going to do it. It's the thing that visually notices, and makes decisions. The unconscious mind is something you don't control. It's part of who you are. It's with you the whole time. It's a core part of your value system. It protects you. It encourages you. It makes you courageous. It makes you afraid. It's every part of the deepest part of you. And it's the thing that influences your conscious mind to make the choices it makes. Knowing this, knowing that we can't control our subconscious, but we can program it, is important. And how do we program it? By choosing a value. When we choose a value, it is a trigger to your subconscious to start working. So if I decide I want to be a guitar player, and I've made that choice for myself, then the subconscious mind says, okay. And it turns on and it starts an entire, it starts a file of all the guitar stuff that you start learning, teaching yourself, hearing, even when you're not aware or consciously looking at a guitar. If there's a guitar nearby, it's aware of the guitar. If there's guitar music playing, it's listening to the guitar music. So that when you sit down and you start practicing guitar, and you start practicing what you're doing, the things that are being doled out to you, that are influencing you, are coming from your subconscious, from all these influences that it's been holding and waiting for. That's what happens when we're working creatively. Where do we get inspiration from? We get it from ourselves. It doesn't come from the outside. It comes from the inside. It comes from the things that you've exposed yourself to. So one of the key parts of becoming a better creative is to understand that the only data that we're gathering is the data that came from the things that we've accepted in. And the only way to accept things in is to put value on the things that are important to you. If you're not interested at all in anything, it's not going to be part of your process. So understanding that and exposing yourself to as much as possible is going to make you a better problem solver. It's going to be able to give you a vaster volume of books to research. Your subconscious is almost like a newspaper. Your conscious is a newspaper. Your subconscious is the reporters that put this newspaper together, the editors and everything that go ahead. They take all the data, they process it, and then they deliver it as a newspaper. And me reading the paper is what I'm using during my conscious mind. The newspaper idea might not be that great of a metaphor, but I just came up with it. So, but that's the important thing, is understanding that this process is ongoing and it's constant. And even when you fall asleep, it's there. I mean, you ever think about the fact that when you fall asleep, you are dreaming of a thing, and you are the author of the dream, you are the actor within the dream, you are the composer of any kind of music that's in the dream, you are the costume designer, you are the set director, and on top of everything else, you're a member of the audience, observing this thing as though you didn't create it. Why are you scared of the monster under the bed? You're the one who put the monster under the bed. It's an amazing thing. Your mind's an amazing thing. And the understanding that your subconscious is the thing that's delivering all of these things to you is incredibly important. Knowing that it's with you all the time, and then putting yourself in situations where there's more data that's valuable to you is a key part of the process. You can live more in the extreme if you allow yourself to reach further. There is a utopia in our mind's eye that we always are reaching for. But when we work towards that utopian ideal, we tend to fall short. And we are disappointed because we failed. And then we try harder, and we work harder, and we study, and we research, we practice. But what happens during the process there is that ideals get stronger, our expectations of ourselves also get bigger, and that utopia gets pushed away further. And so we're back to where we started. So the utopia that's in our mind, placed there as a goal, is actually unreachable. And it's not intended to be reached. It's intended to be chased. And that's where a lot of us fail. If we keep failing because we're not reaching that utopia, not understanding that it's not there to be reached, it's there to be chased, we get discouraged and we say, I'm not the kind of person who's designed to do that kind of work. I'm not the kind of person that's qualified. I wasn't born with the skills necessary to succeed at this thing. So it's not a matter of being born with a skill. It's a matter of what do you value and are willing to chase after.